Algeria. Algeria, officially the People's Democratic Republic of Algeria, is a country in the Maghreb region of North Africa. It is bordered to the northeast by Tunisia, to the east by Libya, to the southeast by Niger, to the southwest by Mali, Mauritania, and Western Sahara, to the west by Morocco, and to the north by the Mediterranean Sea. Algeria has a semi-arid climate, with the Sahara Desert dominating most of the territory except for its fertile and mountainous north, where most of the population is concentrated. Spanning 2,381,741 square kilometers, 919,595 square miles, it is the world's 10th largest nation by area, and the largest nation in Africa. With a population of 44 million, Algeria is the 10th most populous country in Africa, and the 32nd most populous country in the world. The capital and largest city is Algiers, located in the far north on the Mediterranean coast. Inhabited since prehistory, Algeria has been at the crossroads of numerous cultures and civilizations, including the Phoenicians, Romans, Vandals, Byzantine Greeks, and Turks. Its modern identity is rooted in centuries of Arab-Muslim migration waves since the 7th century and the subsequent Arabization of the Berber population. Following a succession of Islamic Arab and Berber dynasties between the 8th and 15th centuries, the Regency of Algiers was established in 1516 as a largely independent tributary state of the Ottoman Empire, ruling over much of the country's present-day northern territory. After nearly 3 centuries as a major power in the Mediterranean, the country was invaded by France in 1830 and formally annexed in 1848, though it was not fully conquered and pacified until 1903. French rule brought mass European settlement that displaced the local population, which was reduced by up to 1/3 due to warfare, disease, and starvation. The Sétif and Guelma massacre in 1945 catalyzed local resistance that culminated in the outbreak of the Algerian War in 1954. Algeria gained its independence on July 5, 1962 and declared the People's Democratic Republic on September 25 of that year. The country descended into a bloody civil war from 1991 to 2002. Algeria's official languages are Arabic and Tamazight. French is used in media, education, and certain administrative matters. The vast majority of the population speak the Algerian dialect of Arabic. Most Algerians are Arabs, with Berbers forming a sizable minority. Sunni Islam is the official religion and practiced by 99% of the population. Algeria is a semi-presidential republic composed of 58 provinces, wilayas, and 1,541 communes. It is a regional power in North Africa and a middle power in global affairs. The country has the second highest Human Development Index in continental Africa and one of the largest economies in Africa, due mostly to its large petroleum and natural gas reserves, which are the 16th and 9th largest in the world, respectively. Sonatrach, the national oil company, is the largest company in Africa and a major supplier of natural gas to Europe. The Algerian military is one of the largest in Africa, with the highest defense budget on the continent and among the highest in the world. Algeria is a member of the African Union, the Arab League, the OIC, OPEC, the United Nations, and the Arab Maghreb Union, of which it is a founding member.
Name. Other forms of the name are Arabic, Al-Jazer, Algerian Arabic, Al-Zaire, French, Algerie. It is officially the People's Democratic Republic of Algeria, Arabic, Al-Jamhiriya Al-Jazairiya Ad-Mukriya Ash-Shabiya, French, République Algérienne Démocratique et Populaire, abbreviated as RADP. Etymology. Algeria's name derives from the city of Algiers, which in turn derives from the Arabic Al-Jazer, the islands, referring to 4 small islands off its coast, a truncated form of the older Jazer Bani Mazgana, islands of Bani Mazgana. The name was given by Bulugan ibn Ziri after he established the city on the ruins of the Phoenician city of Icosium in 950. It was employed by medieval geographers such as Muhammad al-Idrisi and Yaqut al-Hamawi. Algeria took its name from the Regency of Algeria or Regency of Algiers, when Ottoman rule was established in the central Maghreb in early 16th century. This period saw the installation of a political and administrative organization which participated in the establishment of the Algerian, Watan El Jazair, country of Algiers, and the definition of its borders with its neighboring entities on the east and west. The Ottoman Turks who settled in Algeria referred both to themselves and the peoples as Algerians. Acting as a central military and political authority in the Regency, the Ottoman Turks shaped the modern political identity of Algeria as a state possessing all the attributes of sovereign independence, despite still being nominally subject to the Ottoman Sultan. Algerian nationalist, historian and statesman Ahmed Tofek el-Madani regarded the Regency as the first Algerian state and the Algerian Ottoman Republic.
History. Prehistory and ancient history. Around 1.8 million-year-old stone artifacts from Ain Hanik, Algeria, were considered to represent the oldest archaeological materials in North Africa. Stone artifacts and cut-marked bones that were excavated from two nearby deposits at Ain Bouchret are estimated to be 1.9 million years old, and even older stone artifacts to be as old as 2.4 million years. Hence, the Ain Bouchret evidence shows that ancestral hominins inhabited the Mediterranean fringe in northern Africa much earlier than previously thought. The evidence strongly argues for early dispersal of stone tool manufacture and use from East Africa, or a possible multiple origin scenario of stone technology in both East and North Africa. Neanderthal tool makers produced hand axes in the Levalloisian and Mysterian styles, 43,000 BC, similar to those in the Levant. Algeria was the site of the highest state of development of Middle Paleolithic flake tool techniques. Tools of this era, starting about 30,000 BC, are called Aterian, after the archaeological site of Bir el Ater, south of Tibessa. The earliest blade industries in North Africa are called Ibero-Mauritian, located mainly in the Oran region. This industry appears to have spread throughout the coastal regions of the Maghreb between 15,000 and 10,000 BC. Neolithic civilization, animal domestication and agriculture, developed in the Saharan and Mediterranean Maghreb perhaps as early as 11,000 BC or as late as between 1600 and 2000 BC. This life, richly depicted in the Tassili Eniger paintings, predominated in Algeria until the Classical period. The mixture of peoples of North Africa coalesced eventually into a distinct native population that came to be called Berbers, who are the indigenous peoples of northern Africa. From their principal center of power at Carthage, the Carthaginians expanded and established small settlements along the North African coast. By 600 BC, a Phoenician presence existed at Tipesa, east of Churchill, Hippo Regius, modern Annaba, and Ruzicade, modern Skikda. These settlements served as market towns as well as anchorages. As Carthaginian power grew, its impact on the indigenous population increased dramatically. Berber civilization was already at a stage in which agriculture, manufacturing, trade, and political organization supported several states. Trade links between Carthage and the Berbers in the interior grew, but territorial expansion also resulted in the enslavement or military recruitment of some Berbers and in the extraction of tribute from others. By the early 4th century BC, Berbers formed the single largest element of the Carthaginian army. In the revolt of the mercenaries, Berber soldiers rebelled from 241 to 238 BC after being unpaid following the defeat of Carthage in the First Punic War. They succeeded in obtaining control of much of Carthage's North African territory, and they minted coins bearing the name Libyan, used in Greek to describe natives of North Africa. The Carthaginian state declined because of successive defeats by the Romans in the Punic Wars. In 146 BC, the city of Carthage was destroyed. As Carthaginian power waned, the influence of Berber leaders in the hinterland grew. By the 2nd century BC, several large but loosely administered Berber kingdoms had emerged. Two of them were established in Numidia, behind the coastal areas controlled by Carthage. West of Numidia lay Mauritania, which extended across the Malia River in modern-day Morocco to the Atlantic Ocean. The high point of Berber civilization, unequaled until the coming of the Almohads and Almoravids more than a millennium later, was reached during the reign of Massinissa in the 2nd century BC. After Massinissa's death in 148 BC, the Berber kingdoms were divided and reunited several times. Massinissa's line survived until 24 AD, when the remaining Berber territory was annexed to the Roman Empire. For several centuries Algeria was ruled by the Romans, who founded many colonies in the region. Algeria is home to the second largest number of Roman sites and remains after Italy. Rome, after getting rid of its powerful rival Carthage in the year 146 BC, decided a century later to include Numidia to become the new master of North Africa. They built more than 500 cities. Like the rest of North Africa, Algeria was one of the breadbaskets of the empire, exporting cereals and other agricultural products. Saint Augustine was the bishop of Hippo Regius, modern-day Annaba, Algeria, located in the Roman province of Africa. The Germanic Vandals of Gaiseric moved into North Africa in 429, and by 435 controlled coastal Numidia. They did not make any significant settlement on the land, as they were harassed by local tribes. In fact, by the time the Byzantines arrived, Leptis Magna was abandoned and the Msalata region was occupied by the indigenous Libuatan who had been busy facilitating an Amazigh political, military, and cultural revival. Furthermore, during the rule of the Romans, Byzantines, Vandals, Carthaginians, and Ottomans, the Berber people were the only or one of the few in North Africa who remained independent. The Berber people were so resistant that even during the Muslim conquest of North Africa they still had control and possession over their mountains. The collapse of the Western Roman Empire led to the establishment of a native kingdom based in Altaiva, modern-day Algeria, known as the Maro-Roman Kingdom. It was succeeded by another kingdom based in Altaiva, the Kingdom of Altaiva. During the reign of Kasela, its territory extended from the region of modern-day Fez in the west to the western Oras and later Kairouan, and the interior of Ifriqiya in the east.
Middle Ages. After negligible resistance from the locals, Muslim Arabs of the Umayyad Caliphate conquered Algeria in the early 8th century. Large numbers of the indigenous Berber people converted to Islam. Christians, Berber and Latin speakers remained in the great majority in Tunisia until the end of the 9th century, and Muslims only became a vast majority sometime in the 10th. After the fall of the Umayyad Caliphate, numerous local dynasties emerged, including the Rustamids, Aghlabids, Fatimids, Zirids, Hamidids, Almoravids, Almohads and the Zayanids. The Christians left in 3 waves, after the initial conquest, in the 10th century and the 11th. The last were evacuated to Sicily by the Normans, and the few remaining died out in the 14th century. During the Middle Ages, North Africa was home to many great scholars, saints and sovereigns, including Judah ibn Quraysh, the first grammarian to mention Semitic and Berber languages, the great Sufi master Sidi Boumediene, Abu Madian, and Sidi el-Houari, and the emirs Abidi al-Mumin and Yug Murisin. It was during this time that the Fatimids, or children of Fatima, daughter of Muhammad, came to the Maghreb. These Fatimids went on to found a long-lasting dynasty stretching across the Maghreb, Hijaz and the Levant, boasting a secular inner government, as well as a powerful army and navy, made up primarily of Arabs and Levantines extending from Algeria to their capital state of Cairo. The Fatimid Caliphate began to collapse when its governors, the Zirids, seceded. To punish them, the Fatimids sent the Arab Banu Hilal and Banu Sulaim against them. The resultant war is recounted in the epic Taghribat. In Al-Taghribat, the Amazigh Zirid hero Khalifa al-Zinadi asks daily for duels to defeat the Hilalan hero Abu Zayd al-Hilali and many other Arab knights in a string of victories. The Zirids, however, were ultimately defeated, ushering in an adoption of Arab customs and culture. The indigenous Amazigh tribes, however, remained largely independent and, depending on tribe, location and time, controlled varying parts of the Maghreb, at times unifying it, as under the Fatimids. The Fatimid Islamic State, also known as Fatimid Caliphate, made an Islamic empire that included North Africa, Sicily, Palestine, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, Egypt, the Red Sea coast of Africa, Tihama, Hijaz and Yemen. Caliphates from northern Africa traded with the other empires of their time, as well as forming part of a confederated support and trade network with other Islamic states during the Islamic era. The Berber people historically consisted of several tribes. The 2 main branches were the Bakr and Barnes tribes, who were divided into tribes, and again into sub-tribes. Each region of the Maghreb contained several tribes, for example, Sanhaja, Hoera, Zanata, Mesmauda, Katama, Awarba, and Bergwada. All these tribes made independent territorial decisions. Several Amazigh dynasties emerged during the Middle Ages in the Maghreb and other nearby lands. Ibn Khaldun provides a table summarizing the Amazigh dynasties of the Maghreb region: the Zirid, Ifrinid, Maghrawa, Almoravid, Hamidid, Almohad, Marinid, Abdalwadid, Wadacid, Magnassa and Hafsid dynasties. Both of the Hamidid and Zirid empires as well as the Fatimids established their rule in all of the Maghreb countries. The Zirids ruled land in what is now Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco, Libya, Spain, Malta and Italy. The Hamidids captured and held important regions such as Ouargla, Constantine, Sfax, Susa, Algiers, Tripoli and Fez, establishing their rule in every country in the Maghreb region. The Fatimids, which was created and established by the Khatama Berbers, conquered all of North Africa as well as Sicily and parts of the Middle East. Following the Berber revolt, numerous independent states emerged across the Maghreb. In Algeria, the Rustamid kingdom was established. The Rustamid realm stretched from Tafilalt in Morocco to the Nafusa Mountains in Libya, including south, central and western Tunisia, therefore including territory in all of the modern-day Maghreb countries. In the south, the Rustamid realm expanded to the modern borders of Mali and included territory in Mauritania. Once extending their control over all of the Maghreb, part of Spain and briefly over Sicily, originating from modern Algeria, the Zirids only controlled modern Africa by the 11th century. The Zirids recognized nominal suzerainty of the Fatimid caliphs of Cairo. Al-Mu'izz, the Zirid ruler, decided to end this recognition and declared his independence. The Zirids also fought against other Zenata kingdoms, for example the Maghrawa, a Berber dynasty originating from Algeria and which at one point was a dominant power in the Maghreb, ruling over much of Morocco and western Algeria including Fez, Sijil Massa, Agmat, Oujda, most of the Suandra and reaching as far as Msila and the Zab in Algeria. As the Fatimid state was at the time too weak to attempt a direct invasion, they found another means of revenge. Between the Nile and the Red Sea were living Bedouin nomad tribes expelled from Arabia for their disruption and turbulency. The Banu Hilal and the Banu Salim, for example, who regularly disrupted farmers in the Nile Valley since the nomads would often loot their farms. The then Fatimid vizier decided to destroy what he could not control and broke a deal with the chiefs of these Bedouin tribes. The Fatimids even gave them money to leave. Whole tribes set off with women, children, elders, animals, and camping equipment. Some stopped on the way, especially in Cyrenaica, where they are still one of the essential elements of the settlement, but most arrived in Africa by the Gabes region, arriving 1051. The Zirid ruler tried to stop this rising tide, but with each encounter, the last under the walls of Karouat, his troops were defeated and the Arabs remained masters of the battlefield. The Arabs usually did not take control over the cities, instead looting them and destroying them. The invasion kept going, and in 1057 the Arabs spread on the high plains of Constantine, where they encircled the Qala of Banu Hamad, capital of the Hamidid Emirate, as they had done in Karouat a few decades ago. From there, they gradually gained the upper Algiers and Oran plains. Some of these territories were forcibly taken back by the Almohads in the second half of the 12th century. The influx of Bedouin tribes was a major factor in the linguistic, cultural Arabization of the Maghreb and in the spread of nomadism in areas where agriculture had previously been dominant. Ibn Khaldun noted that the lands ravaged by Banu Hilal tribes had become completely arid desert. The Almohads, originating from modern-day Morocco, although founded by a man originating from modern-day Algeria known as Abd al-Mumin, would soon take control over the Maghreb. During the time of the Almohad dynasty, Abd al-Mumin's tribe, the Kumia, were the main supporters of the throne and the most important body of the empire. Defeating the weakening Almoravid Empire and taking control over Morocco in 1147, they pushed into Algeria in 1152, taking control over Tlemcen, Oran, and Algiers, wresting control from the Hillian Arabs, and by the same year they defeated Hamidids who controlled eastern Algeria. Following their decisive defeat in the Battle of Las Navas de Tolosa in 1212, the Almohads began collapsing, and in 1235 the governor of modern-day Western Algeria, Yeb Murasan ibn Zion, declared his independence and established the Kingdom of Tlemcen and the Zayyanid dynasty. Warring with the Almohad forces attempting to restore control over Algeria for 13 years, they defeated the Almohads in 1248 after killing their caliph in a successful ambush near Oujda. the Zayanids retained their control over Algeria for 3 centuries. Much of the eastern territories of Algeria were under the authority of the Hafsid dynasty, although the Emirate of Béjaïa, encompassing the Algerian territories of the Hafsids, would occasionally be independent from central Tunisian control. At their peak, the Zayanid kingdom included all of Morocco as its vassal to the west, and in the east reached as far as Tunis, which they captured during the reign of Abu Tashfin. After several conflicts with local Barbary pirates sponsored by the Zayanid sultans, Spain decided to invade Algeria and defeat the native kingdom of Tlemcen. In 1505, they invaded and captured Mers el-Kabir, and in 1509, after a bloody siege, they conquered Oran. Following their decisive victories over the Algerians in the western coastal areas of Algeria, the Spanish decided to get bolder and invaded more Algerian cities. In 1510, they led a series of sieges and attacks, taking over Béjaïa in a large siege and leading a semi-successful siege against Algiers. They also besieged Tlemcen. In 1511, they took control over Churchill and Jijil and attacked Mostaganem, where although they were not able to conquer the city, they were able to force a tribute on them.
Early modern era. In 1516, the Turkish privateer brothers Eraj and Hayreddin Barbarossa, who operated successfully under the Hafsids, moved their base of operations to Algiers. They succeeded in conquering Jijil and Algiers from the Spaniards with help from the locals who saw them as liberators from the Christians, but the brothers eventually assassinated the local noble Salim al-Tumi and took control over the city and the surrounding regions. Their state is known as the Regency of Algiers. When Eraj was killed in 1518 during his invasion of Tlemcen, Hayreddin succeeded him as military commander of Algiers. The Ottoman Sultan gave him the title of Beylerbey and a contingent of some 2,000 janissaries. With the aid of this force and native Algerians, Hayreddin conquered the whole area between Constantine and Oran, although the city of Oran remained in Spanish hands until 1792. The next Beylerbey was Hayreddin's son Hassan, who assumed the position in 1544. He was a Kaluli or of mixed origins, as his mother was an Algerian Murres. Until 1587, Beylerbeylik of Algiers was governed by Beylerbeys who served terms with no fixed limits. Subsequently, with the institution of a regular administration, governors with the title of Pasha ruled for 3-year terms. The Pasha was assisted by an autonomous janissary unit, known in Algeria as the Ojak, who were led by an Aga. Discontent among the Ojak rose in the mid-1600s because they were not paid regularly, and they repeatedly revolted against the Pasha. As a result, the Aga charged the Pasha with corruption and incompetence and seized power in 1659. Plague had repeatedly struck the cities of North Africa. Algiers lost between 30,000 and 50,000 inhabitants to the plague in 1620-21, and had high fatalities in 1654-57, 1665, 1691, and 1740-42. The Barbary pirates preyed on Christian and other non-Islamic shipping in the western Mediterranean Sea. The pirates often took the passengers and crew on the ships and sold them or used them as slaves. They also did a brisk business in ransoming some of the captives. According to Robert Davis, from the 16th to 19th century, pirates captured 1 million to 1.25 million Europeans as slaves. They often made raids on European coastal towns to capture Christian slaves to sell at slave markets in North Africa and other parts of the Ottoman Empire. In 1544, for example, Hayreddin Barbarossa captured the island of Ischia, taking 4,000 prisoners, and enslaved some 9,000 inhabitants of Lipari, almost the entire population. In 1551, the Ottoman governor of Algiers, Turgut Reis, enslaved the entire population of the Maltese island of Gozo. Barbary pirates often attacked the Balearic Islands. The threat was so severe that residents abandoned the island of Formentera. The introduction of broad-sail ships from the beginning of the 17th century allowed them to branch out into the Atlantic. In July 1627, 2 pirate ships from Algiers under the command of Dutch pirate Jan Janssen sailed as far as Iceland, raiding and capturing slaves. 2 weeks earlier, another pirate ship from Sale in Morocco had also raided in Iceland. Some of the slaves brought to Algiers were later ransomed back to Iceland, but some chose to stay in Algeria. In 1629, pirate ships from Algeria raided the Faroe Islands. In 1659, the Janissary station in Algiers, also known commonly as the Ojak of Algiers, and the Reis or the company of corsair captains rebelled. They removed the Ottoman viceroy from power and placed one of its own in power. The new leader received the title of Aga, then Dey, in 1671, and the right to select passed to the Divan, a council of some 60 military senior officers. Thus Algiers became a sovereign military republic. It was at first dominated by the Ajak, but by the 18th century, it had become the day's instrument. Although Algiers remained nominally part of the Ottoman Empire, in reality they acted independently from the rest of the empire and often had wars with other Ottoman subjects and territories such as the Beylik of Tunis. The Dey was in effect a constitutional autocrat. The Dey was elected for a life term, but in the 159 years 1671 to 1830 that the system was in place, 14 of the 29 Deys were assassinated. Despite usurpation, military coups, and occasional mob rule, the day-to-day operation of the Deylikal government was remarkably orderly. Although the regency patronized the tribal chieftains, it never had the unanimous allegiance of the countryside, where heavy taxation frequently provoked unrest. Autonomous tribal states were tolerated, and the regency's authority was seldom applied in the Kabylia, although in 1730 the regency was able to take control over the kingdom of Kuku in western Kabylia. Many cities in the northern parts of the Algerian desert paid taxes to Algiers or one of its bays. Barbary raids in the Mediterranean continued to attack Spanish merchant shipping, and as a result, the Spanish Empire launched an invasion in 1775, then the Spanish Navy bombarded Algiers in 1783 and 1784. For the attack in 1784, the Spanish fleet was to be joined by ships from such traditional enemies of Algiers as Naples, Portugal, and the Knights of Malta. Over 20,000 cannonballs were fired, but all these military campaigns were doomed and Spain had to ask for peace in 1786 and paid 1 million pesos to the Dey. In 1792, Algiers took back Oran and Mers el Kabir, the two last Spanish strongholds in Algeria. In the same year, they conquered the Moroccan Rif and Oujda, which they then abandoned in 1795. In the 19th century, Algerian pirates forged affiliations with Caribbean powers, paying a license tax in exchange for safe harbor of their vessels. Attacks by Algerian pirates on American merchantmen resulted in the First and Second Barbary Wars, which ended the attacks on U.S. ships in 1815. A year later, a combined Anglo-Dutch fleet, under the command of Lord Exmouth, bombarded Algiers to stop similar attacks on European fishermen. These efforts proved successful, although Algerian piracy would continue until the French conquest in 1830.
French colonization, 1830 to 1962. Under the pretext of a slight to their consul, the French invaded and captured Algiers in 1830. According to several historians, the methods used by the French to establish control over Algeria reached genocidal proportions. Historian Ben Kiernan wrote on the French conquest of Algeria. By 1875, the French conquest was complete. The war had killed approximately 825,000 indigenous Algerians since 1830. French losses from 1831 to 1851 were 92,329 dead in the hospital and only 3,336 killed in action. In 1872, the Algerian population stood at about 2.9 million. French policy was predicated on civilizing the country. The slave trade and piracy in Algeria ceased following the French conquest. The conquest of Algeria by the French took some time and resulted in considerable bloodshed. A combination of violence and disease epidemics caused the indigenous Algerian population to decline by nearly one-third from 1830 to 1872. On September 17, 1860, Napoleon III declared, "Our first duty is to take care of the happiness of the 3 million Arabs, whom the fate of arms has brought under our domination." During this time, only Kabylia resisted. The Kabylians were not colonized until after the Mokrani Revolt in 1871. Alexis de Tocqueville wrote and never completed an unpublished essay outlining his ideas for how to transform Algeria from an occupied tributary state to a colonial regime, wherein he advocated for a mixed system of total domination and total colonization, whereby French military would wage total war against civilian populations while a colonial administration would provide rule of law and property rights to settlers within French-occupied cities. From 1848 until independence, France administered the whole Mediterranean region of Algeria as an integral part and department of the nation. One of France's longest-held overseas territories, Algeria became a destination for hundreds of thousands of European immigrants, who became known as colons and later as Pied Noirs. Between 1825 and 1847, 50,000 French people emigrated to Algeria. These settlers benefited from the French government's confiscation of communal land from tribal peoples, and the application of modern agricultural techniques that increased the amount of arable land. Many Europeans settled in Oran and Algiers, and by the early 20th century they formed a majority of the population in both cities. During the late 19th and early 20th century, the European share was almost a fifth of the population. The French government aimed at making Algeria an assimilated part of France, and this included substantial educational investments, especially after 1900. The indigenous cultural and religious resistance heavily opposed this tendency, but in contrast to the other colonized countries' path in Central Asia and Caucasus, Algeria kept its individual skills in a relatively human capital-intensive agriculture. During the Second World War, Algeria came under Vichy control before being liberated by the Allies in Operation Torch, which saw the first large-scale deployment of American troops in the North African campaign. Gradually, dissatisfaction among the Muslim population, which lacked political and economic status under the colonial system, gave rise to demands for greater political autonomy and eventually independence from France. In May 1945, the uprising against the occupying French forces was suppressed through what is now known as the Sétif and Guelma massacre. Tensions between the two population groups came to a head in 1954, when the first violent events of what was later called the Algerian War began after the publication of the Declaration of November 1, 1954. Historians have estimated that between 30,000 and 150,000 Harkis and their dependents were killed by the National Liberation Front, FLN, or by lynch mobs in Algeria. The FLN used hit-and-run attacks in Algeria and France as part of its war, and the French conducted severe reprisals. In addition, the French destroyed over 8,000 villages and relocated over 2 million Algerians to concentration camps. The war led to the death of hundreds of thousands of Algerians and hundreds of thousands of injuries. Historians, like Alastair Horn and Raymond Aron, state that the actual number of Algerian Muslim war dead was far greater than the original FLN and official French estimates, but was less than the 1 million deaths claimed by the Algerian government after independence. Horn estimated Algerian casualties during the span of 8 years to be around 700,000. The war uprooted more than 2 million Algerians. The war against French rule concluded in 1962, when Algeria gained complete independence following the March 1962 Evian Agreements and the July 1962 self-determination referendum.
The first 3 decades of independence, 1962 to 1991. The number of European Pied Noirs who fled Algeria totaled more than 900,000 between 1962 and 1964. The exodus to mainland France accelerated after the Oran massacre of 1962, in which hundreds of militants entered European sections of the city and began attacking civilians. Algeria's first president was the Front de Libération Nationale, FLN, leader Ahmed Ben Bella. Morocco's claim to portions of western Algeria led to the Sand War in 1963. Ben Bella was overthrown in 1965 by Houari Boumediene, his former ally and defense minister. Under Ben Bella, the government had become increasingly socialist and authoritarian. Boumediene continued this trend. However, he relied much more on the army for his support, and reduced the sole legal party to a symbolic role. He collectivized agriculture and launched a massive industrialization drive. Oil extraction facilities were nationalized. This was especially beneficial to the leadership after the international 1973 oil crisis. Boumediene's successor, Chadli Benjedid, introduced some liberal economic reforms. He promoted a policy of Arabization in Algerian society and public life. Teachers of Arabic, brought in from other Muslim countries, spread conventional Islamic thought in schools and sowed the seeds of a return to Orthodox Islam. The Algerian economy became increasingly dependent on oil, leading to hardship when the price collapsed during the 1980s oil glut. Economic recession caused by the crash in world oil prices resulted in Algerian social unrest during the 1980s. By the end of the decade, Benjedid introduced a multi-party system. Political parties developed, such as the Islamic Salvation Front, FIS, a broad coalition of Muslim groups.
Civil War, 1991 to 2002, and aftermath. In December 1991, the Islamic Salvation Front dominated the first of 2 rounds of legislative elections. Fearing the election of an Islamist government, the authorities intervened on January 11, 1992, cancelling the elections. Benjedid resigned and a High Council of State was installed to act as the presidency. It banned the FIS, triggering a civil insurgency between the front's armed wing, the Armed Islamic Group, and the National Armed Forces, in which more than 100,000 people are thought to have died. The Islamist militants conducted a violent campaign of civilian massacres. At several points in the conflict, the situation in Algeria became a point of international concern, most notably during the crisis surrounding Air France Flight 8969, a hijacking perpetrated by the Armed Islamic Group. The Armed Islamic Group declared a ceasefire in October 1997. Algeria held elections in 1999, considered biased by international observers and most opposition groups, which were won by President Abdelaziz Bouteflika. He worked to restore political stability to the country and announced a civil concord initiative, approved in a referendum, under which many political prisoners were pardoned, and several thousand members of armed groups were granted exemption from prosecution under a limited amnesty, in force until January 13, 2000. The AIS disbanded and levels of insurgent violence fell rapidly. The group Salafiste pour la Prédication et le Combat, GSPC, a splinter group of the Armed Islamic Group, continued a terrorist campaign against the government. Bouteflika was re-elected in the April 2004 presidential election after campaigning on a program of national reconciliation. The program comprised economic, institutional, political and social reform to modernize the country, raise living standards, and tackle the causes of alienation. It also included a second amnesty initiative, the Charter for Peace and National Reconciliation, which was approved in a referendum in September 2005. It offered amnesty to most guerrillas and government security forces. In November 2008, the Algerian constitution was amended following a vote in parliament, removing the 2-term limit on presidential incumbents. This change enabled Bouteflika to stand for re-election in the 2009 presidential elections, and he was re-elected in April 2009. During his election campaign and following his re-election, Bouteflika promised to extend the program of national reconciliation and a $150 billion spending program to create 3 million new jobs, the construction of 1 million new housing units, and to continue public sector and infrastructure modernization programs. A continuing series of protests throughout the country started on December 28, 2010, inspired by similar protests across the Middle East and North Africa. On February 24, 2011, the government lifted Algeria's 19-year-old state of emergency. The government enacted legislation dealing with political parties, the electoral code, and the representation of women in elected bodies. In April 2011, Bouteflika promised further constitutional and political reform. However, elections are routinely criticized by opposition groups as unfair, and international human rights groups say that media censorship and harassment of political opponents continue. On April 2, 2019, Bouteflika resigned from the presidency after mass protests against his candidacy for a 5th term in office. In December 2019, Abdelmadjid Tebboune became Algeria's president, after winning the first round of the presidential election with a record abstention rate, the highest of all presidential elections since Algeria's democracy in 1989. Tebboune is accused of being close to the military and being loyal to the deposed president. Tebboune rejects these accusations, claiming to be the victim of a witch hunt. He also reminds his detractors that he was expelled from the government in August 2017 at the instigation of oligarchs languishing in prison.
Geography. Since the 2011 breakup of Sudan and the creation of South Sudan, Algeria has been the largest country in Africa and the Mediterranean basin. Its southern part includes a significant portion of the Sahara. To the north, the Tell Atlas forms with the Saharan Atlas, further south, 2 parallel sets of reliefs in approaching eastbound, and between which are inserted vast plains and highlands. Both atlas tend to merge in eastern Algeria. the vast mountain ranges of Oras and Nememka occupy the entire northeastern Algeria and are delineated by the Tunisian border. The highest point is Mount Tahat, 3,003 meters or 9,852 feet. Algeria lies mostly between latitudes 19 degrees and 37 degrees north. A small area is north of 37 degrees north and south of 19 degrees north, and longitudes 9 degrees west and 12 degrees east. Most of the coastal area is hilly, sometimes even mountainous, and there are a few natural harbors. The area from the coast to the Tel Atlas is fertile. South of the Tel Atlas is a steppe landscape ending with the Saharan Atlas. Farther south, there is the Sahara Desert. The Haut Gar Mountains, also known as the Haut Gar, are a highland region in central Sahara, southern Algeria. They are located about 1,500 kilometers, 932 miles, south of the capital, Algiers, and just east of Tamanghasset. Algiers, Oran, Constantine, and Annaba are Algeria's main cities.
Climate and hydrology. In this region, midday desert temperatures can be hot year-round. After sunset, however, the clear, dry air permits rapid loss of heat, and the nights are cool to chilly. Enormous daily ranges in temperature are recorded. Rainfall is fairly plentiful along the coastal part of the Tel Atlas, ranging from 400 to 670 millimeters, 15.7 to 26.4 in, annually, the amount of precipitation increasing from west to east. Precipitation is heaviest in the northern part of eastern Algeria, where it reaches as much as 1,000 millimeters, 39.4 in some years. Farther inland, the rainfall is less plentiful. Algeria also has ergs, or sand dunes, between mountains. Among these, in the summertime when winds are heavy and gusty, temperatures can go up to 43.3 degrees Celsius, 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Climate change in Algeria has wide-reaching effects on the country. Algeria was not a significant contributor to climate change, but like other countries in the Middle East and North Africa MENA region, is expected to be among the most affected by climate change impacts. Because a large part of the country is in already hot and arid geographies, including part of the Sahara, already strong heat and water resource access challenges are expected to get worse. As early as 2014, scientists were attributing extreme heat waves to climate change in Algeria. Algeria was ranked 46th of countries in the 2020 Climate Change Performance Index. Fauna and flora. The varied vegetation of Algeria includes coastal, mountainous, and grassy desert-like regions which all support a wide range of wildlife. Many of the creatures constituting the Algerian wildlife live in close proximity to civilization. The most commonly seen animals include the wild boars, jackals, and gazelles, although it is not uncommon to spot fennecs, foxes, and jerboas. Algeria also has a small African leopard and Saharan cheetah population, but these are seldom seen. A species of deer, the Barbary stag, inhabits the dense, humid forests in the northeastern areas. The fennec fox is the national animal of Algeria. A variety of bird species makes the country an attraction for bird watchers. The forests are inhabited by boars and jackals. Barbary macaques are the sole native monkey. Snakes, monitor lizards, and numerous other reptiles can be found living among an array of rodents throughout the semi-arid regions of Algeria. Many animals are now extinct, including the Barbary lions, Atlas bears, and crocodiles. In the north, some of the native flora includes maquia scrub, olive trees, oaks, cedars, and other conifers. The mountain regions contain large forests of evergreens, Aleppo pine, juniper, and evergreen oak, and some deciduous trees. Fig, eucalyptus, agave, and various palm trees grow in the warmer areas. The grapevine is indigenous to the coast. In the Sahara region, some oases have palm trees. Acacias with wild olives are the predominant flora in the remainder of the Sahara. Algeria had a 2018 Forest Landscape Integrity Index mean score of May 22, 10, ranking it 106th globally out of 172 countries. Camels are used extensively. The desert also abounds with venomous and non-venomous snakes, scorpions, and numerous insects.
Government and politics. Elected politicians have relatively little sway over Algeria. Instead, a group of unelected civilian and military decideurs, known as le pouvoir, the power, actually rule the country, even deciding who should be president. The most powerful man might have been Mohammed Medellin, the head of military intelligence, before he was brought down during the 2019 protests. In recent years, many of these generals have died, retired, or been imprisoned. After the death of General Larbi Belkir, previous President Bouteflika put loyalists in key posts, notably at Sonatrach, and secured constitutional amendments that made him re-electable indefinitely, until he was brought down in 2019 during protests. The head of state is the President of Algeria, who is elected for a 5-year term. The president is limited to 2 5-year terms. The most recent presidential election was planned to be in April 2019, but widespread protests erupted on February 22 against the president's decision to participate in the election, which resulted in President Bouteflika announcing his resignation on April 3. Abdelmajid Tebboune, an independent candidate, was elected as president after the election eventually took place on December 12, 2019. Protesters refused to recognize Tebboune as president, citing demands for comprehensive reform of the political system. Algeria has universal suffrage at 18 years of age. The president is the head of the army, the Council of Ministers and the High Security Council. He appoints the prime minister, who is also the head of government. The Algerian parliament is bicameral. The lower house, the People's National Assembly, has 462 members who are directly elected for 5-year terms, while the upper house, the Council of the Nation, has 144 members serving 6-year terms, of which 96 members are chosen by local assemblies and 48 are appointed by the president. According to the constitution, no political association may be formed if it is based on differences in religion, language, race, gender, profession, or region. In addition, political campaigns must be exempt from the aforementioned subjects. Parliamentary elections were last held in May 2017. In the elections, the FLN lost 44 of its seats, but remained the largest party with 164 seats. The military-backed National Rally for Democracy won 100, and the Muslim Brotherhood-linked Movement of the Society for Peace won 33. Foreign relations. Algeria is included in the European Union's European Neighbourhood Policy, ENP, which aims at bringing the EU and its neighbours closer. Giving incentives and rewarding best performers, as well as offering funds in a faster and more flexible manner, are the two main principles underlying the European Neighbourhood Instrument, ENI, that came into force in 2014. It has a budget of €15.4 billion and provides the bulk of funding through a number of programs. In 2009, the French government agreed to compensate victims of nuclear tests in Algeria. Defense Minister Hervé Morin stated that, "It's time for our country to be at peace with itself, at peace thanks to a system of compensation and reparations," when presenting the draft law on the payouts. Algerian officials and activists believe that this is a good first step and hope that this move would encourage broader reparation. Tensions between Algeria and Morocco in relation to the Western Sahara have been an obstacle to tightening the Arab Maghreb Union, nominally established in 1989, but which has carried little practical weight. On August 24, 2021, Algeria announced the break of diplomatic relations with Morocco.
Military. The military of Algeria consists of the People's National Army, ANP, the Algerian National Navy, MRA, and the Algerian Air Force, QJJ, plus the Territorial Air Defense Forces. It is the direct successor of the National Liberation Army, Armée de Libération Nationale or ALN, the armed wing of the nationalist National Liberation Front which fought French colonial occupation during the Algerian War of Independence, 1954–62. Total military personnel include 147,000 active, 150,000 reserve, and 187,000 paramilitary staff, 2008 estimate. Service in the military is compulsory for men aged 19 to 30, for a total of 12 months. The military expenditure was 4.3% of the gross domestic product, GDP, in 2012. Algeria has the second largest military in North Africa, with the largest defense budget in Africa, $10 billion. Most of Algeria's weapons are imported from Russia, with whom they are a close ally. In 2007, the Algerian Air Force signed a deal with Russia to purchase 49 MiG-29 SMT and 6 MiG-29 UBT at an estimated cost of $1.9 billion. Russia is also building two 636-type diesel submarines for Algeria. Human rights. Algeria has been categorized by the U.S. government-funded Freedom House as not free since it began publishing such ratings in 1972. With the exception of 1989, 1990, and 1991, when the country was labeled partly free. In December 2016, the Euro-Mediterranean Human Rights Monitor issued a report regarding violation of media freedom in Algeria. It clarified that the Algerian government imposed restrictions on freedom of the press, expression, and right to peaceful demonstration, protest and assembly, as well as intensified censorship of the media and websites. Due to the fact that the journalists and activists criticize the ruling government, some media organizations' licenses are cancelled. Independent and autonomous trade unions face routine harassment from the government, with many leaders imprisoned and protests suppressed. In 2016, a number of unions, many of which were involved in the 2010 to 2012 Algerian protests, have been deregistered by the government. Homosexuality is illegal in Algeria. Public homosexual behavior is punishable by up to 2 years in prison. Human Rights Watch has accused the Algerian authorities of using the COVID-19 pandemic as an excuse to prevent pro-democracy movements and protests in the country, leading to the arrest of youths as part of social distancing. Administrative divisions. Algeria is divided into 58 provinces, wilayas, 553 districts, daras, and 1,541 municipalities, baladiyas. Each province, district, and municipality is named after its seat, which is usually the largest city. The administrative divisions have changed several times since independence. When introducing new provinces, the numbers of old provinces are kept.
Economy. Algeria's currency is the dinar, DZD. The economy remains dominated by the state, a legacy of the country's socialist post-independence development model. In recent years, the Algerian government has halted the privatization of state-owned industries and imposed restrictions on imports and foreign involvement in its economy. These restrictions are just starting to be lifted off recently, although questions about Algeria's slowly diversifying economy remain. Algeria has struggled to develop industries outside hydrocarbons in part because of high costs and an inert state bureaucracy. The government's efforts to diversify the economy by attracting foreign and domestic investment outside the energy sector have done little to reduce high youth unemployment rates or to address housing shortages. The country is facing a number of short-term and medium-term problems, including the need to diversify the economy, strengthen political, economic and financial reforms, improve the business climate and reduce inequalities among regions. A wave of economic protests in February and March 2011 prompted the Algerian government to offer more than $23 billion in public grants and retroactive salary and benefit increases. Public spending has increased by 27% annually during the past 5 years. The 2010-14 public investment program will cost $286 billion, 40% of which will go to human development. Thanks to strong hydrocarbon revenues, Algeria has a cushion of $173 billion in foreign currency reserves and a large hydrocarbon stabilization fund. In addition, Algeria's external debt is extremely low at about 2% of GDP. The economy remains very dependent on hydrocarbon wealth, and, despite high foreign exchange reserves, $178 billion, equivalent to 3 years of imports, current expenditure growth makes Algeria's budget more vulnerable to the risk of prolonged lower hydrocarbon revenues. Algeria has not joined the WTO, despite several years of negotiations, but is a member of the Greater Arab Free Trade Area, the African Continental Free Trade Area, and has an association agreement with the European Union. Turkish direct investments have accelerated in Algeria, with total value reaching $5 billion. As of 2022, the number of Turkish companies present in Algeria has reached 1,400. In 2020, despite the pandemic, more than 130 Turkish companies were created in Algeria.
Oil and natural resources. Algeria, whose economy is reliant on petroleum, has been an OPEC member since 1969. Its crude oil production stands at around 1.1 million barrels/day, but it is also a major gas producer and exporter, with important links to Europe. Hydrocarbons have long been the backbone of the economy, accounting for roughly 60% of budget revenues, 30% of GDP, and 87.7% of export earnings. Algeria has the 10th largest reserves of natural gas in the world and is the 6th largest gas exporter. The U.S. Energy Information Administration reported that in 2005, Algeria had 4.5 trillion cubic meters, 160 by 1,012 cubic feet, of proven natural gas reserves. It also ranks 16th in oil reserves. Non-hydrocarbon growth for 2011 was projected at 5%. To cope with social demands, the authorities raised expenditure, especially on basic food support, employment creation, support for SMEs, and higher salaries. High hydrocarbon prices have improved the current account and the already large international reserves position. Income from oil and gas rose in 2011 as a result of continuing high oil prices, though the trend in production volume is downward. Production from the oil and gas sector in terms of volume continues to decline, dropping from 43.2 million tons to 32 million tons between 2007 and 2011. Nevertheless, the sector accounted for 98% of the total volume of exports in 2011, against 48% in 1962, and 70% of budgetary receipts, or $71.4 billion. The Algerian national oil company is Sonatrach, which plays a key role in all aspects of the oil and natural gas sectors in Algeria. All foreign operators must work in partnership with Sonatrach, which usually has majority ownership in production sharing agreements. Access to biocapacity in Algeria is lower than world average. In 2016, Algeria had 0.53 global hectares of biocapacity per person within its territory, much less than the world average of 1.6 global hectares per person. In 2016, Algeria used 2.4 global hectares of biocapacity per person, their ecological footprint of consumption. This means they use just under 4.5 times as much biocapacity as Algeria contains. As a result, Algeria is running a biocapacity deficit. In April 2022, diplomats from Italy and Spain held talks after Rome's move to secure large volume of Algerian gas stoked concerns in Madrid. Under the deal between Algeria's Sonatrach and Italy's Eni, Algeria will send an additional 9 billion cubic meters of gas to Italy by next year and in 2024. Research and alternative energy sources. Algeria has invested an estimated 100 billion dinars towards developing research facilities and paying researchers. This development program is meant to advance alternative energy production, especially solar and wind power. Algeria is estimated to have the largest solar energy potential in the Mediterranean, so the government has funded the creation of a solar science park in Hassi R'Mel. Currently, Algeria has 20,000 research professors at various universities and over 780 research labs, with state-set goals to expand to 1,000. Besides solar energy, areas of research in Algeria include space and satellite telecommunications, nuclear power, and medical research. Labor market. The overall rate of unemployment was 10% in 2011, but remained higher among young people, with a rate of 21.5% for those aged between 15 and 24. The government strengthened in 2011 the job programs introduced in 1988, in particular in the framework of the program to aid those seeking work, Dispositif d'aide à l'insertion professionnelle. Despite a decline in total unemployment, youth and women unemployment is high.
Tourism. The development of the tourism sector in Algeria had previously been hampered by a lack of facilities, but since 2004 a broad tourism development strategy has been implemented, resulting in many hotels of a high modern standard being built. There are several UNESCO World Heritage sites in Algeria, including Al-Khaleh of Beni Hammad, the first capital of the Hammadid Empire, Tipasa, a Phoenician and later Roman town, and Gemala and Timgad, both Roman ruins, Mzab Valley, a limestone valley containing a large urbanized oasis, and the Casbah of Algiers, an important citadel. The only natural World Heritage site is the Tasselai Enajur, a mountain range. Transport. 2 trans-African automobile routes pass through Algeria. Cairo-Dakar Highway. Algiers-Lagos Highway. The Algerian road network is the densest in Africa. Its length is estimated at 180,000 kilometers, 110,000 miles of highways, with more than 3,756 structures and a paving rate of 85%. This network will be complemented by the East-West Highway, a major infrastructure project currently under construction. It is a 3-way, 1,216-kilometer long, 756 miles, highway, linking Annaba in the extreme east to the Tlemcen in the far west. Algeria is also crossed by the Trans-Sahara Highway, which is now completely paved. This road is supported by the Algerian government to increase trade between the 6 countries crossed: Algeria, Mali, Niger, Nigeria, Chad, and Tunisia.
Demographics. Algeria has a population of an estimated 44 million, of which the majority, 75% to 85%, are ethnically Arab. At the outset of the 20th century, its population was approximately 4 million. About 90% of Algerians live in the northern coastal area. The inhabitants of the Sahara Desert are mainly concentrated in oases, although some 1.5 million remain nomadic or partly nomadic. 28.1% of Algerians are under the age of 15. Between 90,000 and 165,000 Sahrawis from Western Sahara live in the Sahrawi refugee camps in the Western Algerian Sahara Desert. There are also more than 4,000 Palestinian refugees, who are well integrated and have not asked for assistance from the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR. In 2009, 35,000 Chinese migrant workers lived in Algeria. The largest concentration of Algerian migrants outside Algeria is in France, which has reportedly over 1.7 million Algerians of up to the 2nd generation. Ethnic groups. Arabs and indigenous Berbers, as well as Phoenicians, Romans, Vandals, Byzantine Greeks, Turks, various sub-Saharan Africans, and French have contributed to the history and culture of Algeria. Descendants of Andalusi refugees are also present in the population of Algiers and other cities. Moreover, Spanish was spoken by these Aragonese and Castilian Morisco descendants deep into the 18th century, and even Catalan was spoken at the same time by Catalan Morisco descendants in the small town of Grishelid. Centuries of Arab migration to the Maghreb, since the 7th century, shifted the demographic scope in Algeria. The majority of the population of Algeria are Arabs, 75% to 85% of the population. Berbers, who make up 15% to 20% of the population, are divided into many groups with varying languages. The largest of these are the Kabyles, who live in the Kabylie region east of Algiers, the Chawi of northeast Algeria, the Tuaregs in the southern desert, and the Chinois people of North Algeria. During the colonial period, there was a large 10% in 1960 European population who became known as Pied Noirs. They were primarily of French, Spanish, and Italian origin. Almost all of this population left during the War of Independence or immediately after its end.
Languages. Modern Standard Arabic and Berber are the official languages. Algerian Arabic, Darja, is the language used by the majority of the population. Colloquial Algerian Arabic has some Berber loanwords which represent 8% to 9% of its vocabulary. Berber has been recognized as a national language by the Constitutional Amendment of May 8, 2002. Kabyle, the predominant Berber language, is taught and is partially co-official, with a few restrictions, in parts of Kabylie. Kabyle has a significant Arabic, French, Latin, Greek, Phoenician, and Punic substratum, and Arabic loanwords represent 35% of the total Kabyle vocabulary. In February 2016, the Algerian Constitution passed a resolution that made Berber an official language alongside Arabic. Algeria emerged as a bilingual state after 1962. Colloquial Algerian Arabic is spoken by about 83% of the population and Berber by 27%. Although French has no official status in Algeria, it has one of the largest Francophone populations in the world, and French is widely used in government, media, newspapers, radio, local television, and both the education system, from primary school onwards, and academia due to Algeria's colonial history. It can be regarded as a lingua franca of Algeria. In 2008, 11.2 million Algerians could read and write in French. In 2013, it was estimated that 60% of the population could speak or understand French. In 2022, it was estimated that 33% of the population was francophone. The use of English in Algeria, though limited in comparison to the previously mentioned languages, has increased due to globalization. In 2022, it was announced that English would be taught in elementary schools. Religion. Islam is the predominant religion in Algeria, with its adherents, mostly Sunnis, accounting for 99% of the population according to a 2021 CIA World Factbook estimate, and 97.9% according to Pew Research in 2020. There are about 290,000 Ibadis in the Mzab Valley in the region of Gardia. Prior to independence, Algeria was home to more than 1.3 million Christians, mostly of European ancestry. Most of the Christian settlers left to France after the country's independence. Today, estimates of the Christian population range from 20,000 to 200,000. Algerian citizens who are Christians predominantly belong to Protestant groups, which have seen increased pressure from the government in recent years, including many forced closures. According to the Arab Barometer in 2018 to 2019, the vast majority of Algerians, 99.1%, continue to identify as Muslim. The June 2019 Arab Barometer BBC News report found that the percentage of Algerians identifying as non-religious has grown from around 8% in 2013 to around 15% in 2018. The Arab Barometer December 2019 found that the growth in the percentage of Algerians identifying as non-religious is largely driven by young Algerians, with roughly 25% describing themselves as non-religious. However, the 2021 Arab Barometer report found that those who said they were not religious among Algerians has decreased, with just 2.6% identifying as non-religious. In that same report, 69.5% of Algerians identified as religious and another 27.8% identifying as somewhat religious. Algeria has given the Muslim world a number of prominent thinkers, including Emir Abdelkader, Abdulhamid bin Badis, Moulaud Qasim Nate Belkacem, Malik Benabai, and Mohammed Arkaun.
Health. In 2018, Algeria had the highest numbers of physicians in the Maghreb region, 1.72 per 1,000 people, nurses, 2.23 per 1,000 people, and dentists, 0.31 per 1,000 people. Access to improved water sources was around 97.4% of the population in urban areas and 98.7% of the population in the rural areas. Some 99% of Algerians living in urban areas, and around 93.4% of those living in rural areas, had access to improved sanitation. According to the World Bank, Algeria is making progress toward its goal of reducing by half the number of people without sustainable access to improved drinking water and basic sanitation by 2015. Given Algeria's young population, policy favors preventive health care and clinics over hospitals. In keeping with this policy, the government maintains an immunization program. However, poor sanitation and unclean water still cause tuberculosis, hepatitis, measles, typhoid fever, cholera, and dysentery. The poor generally receive healthcare free of charge. Health records have been maintained in Algeria since 1882 and began adding Muslims living in the south to their vital record database in 1905 during French rule. Education. Since the 1970s, in a centralized system that was designed to significantly reduce the rate of illiteracy, the Algerian government introduced a decree by which school attendance became compulsory for all children aged between 6 and 15 years who have the ability to track their learning through the 20 facilities built since independence. Now the literacy rate is around 92.6%. Since 1972, Arabic is used as the language of instruction during the first 9 years of schooling. From the third year, French is taught and it is also the language of instruction for science classes.
the students can also learn English, Italian, Spanish, and German. In 2008, new programs at the elementary appeared, therefore the compulsory schooling does not start at the age of 6 anymore, but at the age of 5. Apart from the 122 private schools, the universities of the state are free of charge. After 9 years of primary school, students can go to a high school or to an educational institution. The school offers 2 programs, general or technical. At the end of the 3rd year of secondary school, students pass the exam of the baccalaureate, which allows once it is successful to pursue graduate studies in universities and institutes. Education is officially compulsory for children between the ages of 6 and 15. In 2008, the illiteracy rate for people over 10 was 22.3%, 15.6% for men and 29% for women. The province with the lowest rate of illiteracy was Algiers province at 11.6%, while the province with the highest rate was Jelfa province at 35.5%. Algeria has 26 universities and 67 institutions of higher education, which must accommodate 1 million Algerians and 80,000 foreign students in 2008. The University of Algiers, founded in 1879, is the oldest. It offers education in various disciplines: law, medicine, science, and letters. 25 of these universities and almost all of the institutions of higher education were founded after the independence of the country. Even if some of them offer instruction in Arabic like areas of law and the economy, most of the other sectors such as science and medicine continue to be provided in French and English. Among the most important universities, there are the University of Sciences and Technology Houari Boumediene, the University of Menturi Constantine, and University of Oran Essenia. The University of Abu Bakr Belkade in Tlemcen and University of Batna Haj Lakhtar occupy the 26th and 45th row in Africa. Algeria was ranked 119th in the Global Innovation Index in 2023.
Culture. Modern Algerian literature, split between Arabic, Tamazight and French, has been strongly influenced by the country's recent history. Famous novelists of the 20th century include Mohammed Dib, Albert Camus, Kateb Yassine and Ahlam Mostaganami, while Asha Jeber is widely translated. Among the important novelists of the 1980s were Rashid Mamouni, later vice president of Amnesty International, and Tahar Jout, murdered by an Islamist group in 1993 for his secularist views. Malek Benabai and Frantz Fanon are noted for their thoughts on decolonization. Augustine of Hippo was born in Tagaste, modern-day Souk Ahras, and Ibn Khaldun, though born in Tunis, wrote the Muqaddimah while staying in Algeria. The works of the Sanusi family in pre-colonial times, and of Emir Abdelkader and Sheikh Ben Badis in colonial times, are widely noted. The Latin author Apuleius was born in Madoris, Mdawarouch, in what later became Algeria. Contemporary Algerian cinema is varied in terms of genre, exploring a wider range of themes and issues. There has been a transition from cinema which focused on the War of Independence to films more concerned with the everyday lives of Algerians. Media. Art. Algerian painters, like Mohamed Rassim and Baya, attempted to revive the prestigious Algerian past prior to French colonization, at the same time that they have contributed to the preservation of the authentic values of Algeria. In this line, Mohamed Temam, Abdelkader Houmel have also returned through this art, scenes from the history of the country, the habits and customs of the past and the country life. Other new artistic currents including the one of Mhamed Isiakem, Mohamed Kadda and Bachir Yels, appeared on the scene of Algerian painting, abandoning figurative classical painting to find new pictorial ways, to adapt Algerian paintings to the new realities of the country through its struggle and its aspirations. Mohamed Kadda and Mhamed Isiakem have been notable in recent years. Literature. The historic roots of Algerian literature go back to the Numidian and Roman African era, when Apuleius wrote The Golden Ass, the only Latin novel to survive in its entirety. This period had also known Augustine of Hippo, Nonius Marcellus and Martianus Capella, among many others. The Middle Ages have known many Arabic writers who revolutionized the Arab world literature, with authors like Ahmad al-Buni, Ibn Manzur and Ibn Khaldun, who wrote the Muqaddimah while staying in Algeria, and many others.
Albert Camus was an Algerian-born French Pied Noir author. In 1957, he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature. Today Algeria contains, in its literary landscape, big names having not only marked the Algerian literature, but also the universal literary heritage in Arabic and French. As a first step, Algerian literature was marked by works whose main concern was the assertion of the Algerian national entity. There is the publication of novels as the Algerian trilogy of Mohammed Dib, or even Nejma of Kateb Yassin novel, which is often regarded as a monumental and major work. Other known writers will contribute to the emergence of Algerian literature, whom include Moulaud Faraoun, Malek Benabait, Malek Haddad, Mufti Zakaria, Abdulhamid Ben Badis, Mohammed Laid Al-Khalifa, Moulaud Mamri, Frantz Fanon, and Asha Jeber. In the aftermath of the independence, several new authors emerged on the Algerian literary scene. They will attempt through their works to expose a number of social problems. Among them there are Rachid Boujedra, Rachid Mamouni, Leila Sebar, Tahar Jout and Tahir Wattar. Currently, a part of Algerian writers tends to be defined in a literature of shocking expression, due to the terrorism that occurred during the 1990s. The other party is defined in a different style of literature who staged an individualistic conception of the human adventure. Among the most noted recent works, there is The Writer, The Swallows of Kabul and the Attack of Yasmina Khadra, The Oath of Barbarians of Boualem Sansou, Memory of the Flesh of Ahlam Mostaganami and the last novel by Asha Jeber Nowhere in My Father's House.
Music. Chabi music is a typically Algerian musical genre characterized by specific rhythms and of qasidate, popular poems, in Arabic dialect. El Hajj Mohamed El Anka is considered the greatest master of the art in modern times. He wrote over 350 songs and produced some 130 records before his death in 1978. Many of his pupils went on to be renowned musicians. The Constantinois Malouf style is saved by musician from whom Mohammed Tahar Fergani is a performer. Folk music styles include Bedouin music, characterized by the poetic songs based on long qasida, poems, Kabyle music, based on a rich repertoire that is poetry in old tales passed through generations, Shawiya music, a folklore from diverse areas of the Ouraz Mountains. Rahaba music style is unique to the Ouraz. Swad Massi is a rising Algerian folk singer. Other Algerian singers of the diaspora include Manal Falali in Germany and Kenza Farah in France. Turgoue music is sung in Tuareg languages generally. Teneriwen had a worldwide success. Finally, the Stafai music is born in Sétif and remains a unique style of its kind. Modern music is available in several facets. Rai music is a style typical of Western Algeria. Rap, a relatively recent style in Algeria, is experiencing significant growth. Cinema. The Algerian state's interest in film industry activities can be seen in the annual budget of DZD 200 million, 1.3 million euros, allocated to production, specific measures and an ambitious program plan implemented by the Ministry of Culture to promote national production, renovate the cinema stock and remedy the weak links in distribution and exploitation. The financial support provided by the state, through the Fund for the Development of the Arts, Techniques and the Film Industry, FDATIC, and the Algerian Agency for Cultural Influence, ARC, plays a key role in the promotion of national production. Between 2007 and 2013, FDATIC subsidized 98 films, feature films, documentaries, and short films. In mid-2013, ARC had already supported a total of 78 films, including 42 feature films, 6 short films and 30 documentaries. According to the European Audiovisual Observatory's Lumiere database, 41 Algerian films were distributed in Europe between 1996 and 2013. 21 films in this repertoire were Algerian-French co-productions. Days of Glory, 2006, and Outside the Law, 2010, recorded the highest number of admissions in the European Union, 3,172,612 and 474,722, respectively. Algeria won the Palme d'Or for Chronicle of the Years of Fire, 1975, 2 Oscars for Z, 1969,
and other awards for the Italian-Algerian movie The Battle of Algiers.
Cuisine. Algerian cuisine is rich and diverse as a result of interactions and exchanges with other cultures and nations over the centuries. It is based on both land and sea products. Conquests or demographic movement towards the Algerian territory were two of the main factors of exchanges between the different peoples and cultures. The Algerian cuisine is a mix of Arab, Berber, Turkish, and French roots. Algerian cuisine offers a variety of dishes depending on the region and the season, but vegetables and cereals remain at its core. Most of the Algerian dishes are centered around bread, meats, lamb, beef or poultry, olive oil, vegetables, and fresh herbs. Vegetables are often used for salads, soups, tagines, couscous, and sauce-based dishes. Of all the Algerian traditional dishes available, the most famous one is couscous, recognized as a national dish. Sports. Various games have existed in Algeria since antiquity. In the Oras, people played several games such as El Kerba or El Kergeba, chess variant. Playing cards, checkers, and chess games are part of Algerian culture. Racing, fantasia, and rifle shooting are part of cultural recreation of the Algerians. Football is the most popular sport in the country. The Algerian national football team, known as the Desert Foxes, has a strong fan base and has achieved success both domestically and internationally. Algeria has a long history in other sports such as athletics, boxing, volleyball, handball, and the study of martial arts. Algerian athletes have competed in the Olympic Games and have won medals in various events. Many sports clubs and organizations exist in Algeria to promote and develop sports among young people. The Ministry of Youth and Sports in Algeria manages sport-related activities.